Way 91 talks about the relative activity of various elements. In general, if you want to compare the activity of two elements, you're going to have to use table J. The higher the element, the more active it is. So, for example, if you're trying to figure out whether lithium, if you're trying to compare the activity of lithium versus potassium, you know that lithium is higher on the list, and therefore lithium will replace potassium if potassium is present in another compound, because lithium is more active than potassium. In general, it's the metals that get oxidized, they lose electrons. So if you're asking to compare the oxidation activity, or which one is the more powerful oxidizer, the higher the element, the more active it is. The reducers are the nonmetals. The ones that get reduced are nonmetals. They tend to lose electrons. So the more reductive activity is related to how high the element is on this list. So when it comes to doing these problems, the more active the metal, the higher it is on this list. We say that if an element is able to replace the element below it, we call that a spontaneous reaction. It happens naturally because the active element is replacing the less active element. So let's try this idea to answer some problems. Which metal is most easily oxidized? Remember, it's metals that get oxidized on the periodic table. So to figure out which one of these is the most easily oxidized, it's going to be the most active. And you'll find that the answer is Mg, because Mg is higher than silver, cobalt, and copper on table J. Therefore, the answer choice is 4. Next question, which metal is more active than nickel and less active than zinc? So again, look at the answer choices and figure out which one of these is more active than nickel but less active than zinc. Essentially, we're looking for an element that is above nickel but below zinc on the table. And the only one that fits that category is chromium. If you look on table J, chromium is sandwiched in between nickel and zinc. Therefore, chromium is more active than nickel but less active than zinc. Which reaction occurs spontaneously? Notice in the answer choices, we're taking nonmetals here and reacting it with a compound that contains a different nonmetal. To figure out whether the nonmetal separate is going to replace the compound, then in order for that to happen, the compound chlorine, for example, has to be higher than the nonmetal inside it. So when figuring out whether these reactions occur spontaneously, all you have to do is compare the two nonmetals in the reactions. Once you do that, you'll be able to figure out whether the reaction occurs spontaneously. You'll find that the answer is 1 because chlorine is above bromine on the nonmetals listed in table J. So we would say that the activity of chlorine is much higher than bromine. Chlorine is more reactive than bromine and iodine, but it's less reactive than fluorine. So when we do this single replacement reaction, chlorine is actually going to take the place of bromine. Bromine comes out and forms a liquid, and what forms is sodium chloride as a product. Which metal will react spontaneously with strontium ions? So again, we're looking for a metal that is more reactive than strontium. When you look on table J, the only metal that fits that category is cesium. Cesium is located above strontium, therefore it is more reactive and therefore spontaneously react with strontium ions. So what will happen is cesium will get oxidized and transfer its electrons to strontium. The student develops a list shown below that includes laboratory equipment and materials for constructing a voltaic cell. Compare the activities of the two metals used by the student for constructing the voltaic cell. So, of the listed ingredients, which one of those are metals and how do those metals compare in terms of their activity? The two metals listed are zinc and copper, and you'll find that zinc is much more reactive than copper. Therefore, zinc is more reactive than copper on the on table J. Therefore, zinc is going to transfer its electrons to copper. Which metal reacts spontaneously with nickel chloride? This answer is actually already provided, but if you look at table J, you'll find that the only metal listed here that is more active than nickel is zinc. Therefore, answer choice 4 is correct. Okay, so when it comes to comparing the relative activity of metals or nonmetals, you need to use table J. The higher the element, the more reactive it is. Remember, it's metals that get oxidized and nonmetals that get reduced. And when you're trying to figure out whether a particular single replacement reaction is spontaneous, meaning it will occur naturally, the element that's separate has to be higher on table J than the element in the compound. So for example, you saw chlorine was able to replace bromine because chlorine was higher than bromine on table J. Hopefully this was helpful, and thank you for watching.